There's this pervasive idea, especially in audio engineering, that the studio is a sanctuary.
Hmm.
It's this hermetically sealed vessel floating outside of time. It's designed to exclude the world so you can capture something perfect.
Right. A manufactured reality. You lock the heavy doors, you float the floor, and you try to control every single variable.
That's the theory, anyway.
It is. But anyone who's pulled, like, a triple shift in a control room late at night knows that total isolation is a myth.
How so?
Well, when you strip away the noise floor of the outside world, you don't get silence. You get a heightened sensitivity to whatever's left inside that room with you.
Which brings us perfectly to today's deep dive.
It really does.
We're looking at a collection of sources that sit right at that intersection of technical obsession and the totally unexplained. Specifically, we're examining the oral history of an engineer named Alan Florence. He was at IBC Studios in London from 1962 to 1964.
And while on the surface, it's about the legendary producer Joe Meek, it's really a case study in what happens when a control freak runs into something he can't, compress or EQ out of existence.
It's such a fascinating document because Florence isn't just telling a ghost story for the thrill of it.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
He's an engineer, he's giving a technical account of his workspace, and this paranormal activity is reported with the same dry, factual delivery as his description of the mixing console.
Okay, so we have to start with the main character here, Joe Meek. Because to understand the haunting, you really have to understand the kind of energy Meek brought into that building.
Oh, absolutely. The source material calls him an innovator, but that feels like a huge understatement.
Right. In the context of the late 50s and early 60s, Meek was practically a sonic terrorist.
He was a complete outlier. You have to picture the British recording scene at the time. It was all about the white coats.
At places like Abbey Road, yeah.
Exactly. Engineers who treated recording as this scientific documentation process.
Yeah.
The goal was fidelity, transparency.
Capture the orchestra as if you're sitting in the 10th row. That was the ideal.
But Meek didn't care about the 10th row.
No, he wanted the sound to live inside your skull.
And Alan Florence, our source, notes that Meek was well ahead of his time, especially in how he just ignored the rule book.
So he rejected those standard distant miking techniques that were all about preserving room ambience.
Threw them out completely. Meek was jamming microphones right into the grills of amplifiers inches away from snare drums. He was chasing isolation and impact before close miking was even a standard term.
That's where you get that aggressive, dry, in-your-face sound from.
Yes. And it didn't stop at the capture stage.
Yeah.
I mean, the way he used dynamic processing was completely counterintuitive for the era.
He wasn't using compression just to gently tame peak?
No, he was crushing the signal.
Okay.
He was using the compressor as a musical instrument.
As an effect.
Right. He'd hit those limiters so hard that the whole track would pump and breathe. To a classically trained engineer at, say, Decca or EMI, that was technically broken. It was distortion.
But for Meek, that pumping artifact was the kinetic energy of the track.
It's what gave songs like Telstar or Have I, like, that manic driving urgency.
And what about the phasing? The source credits Meek with basically inventing it years before it became a staple of psychedelia.
Oh, yeah. We think of that sweeping jet plane flange effect from the late 60s, Hendrix or the Small Faces.
Sure.
But Meek was manually manipulating tape flanges way, way back in the mono era. It created this swirling, disorienting texture that, honestly, it just shouldn't exist in a pop song from 1960.
And that's the whole paradox of Joe Meek, isn't it? He was an independent producer, a total rogue agent.
In a monolithic industry, yeah.
The major labels in London saw him as a legitimate threat. This guy is operating out of a home studio on Holloway Road, and he's racking up #1 hits.
And outselling the big guys with their massive budgets and pristine facilities.
So you have this intense, high-strung genius who is obsessed with controlling sound, pushing gear past its limits, and then he walks into IBC Studios.
Right. And even though Meek had his own place, he used IBC for cutting acetates, for mastering. It was a hub. And this is where Alan Florence, our narrator, comes in. He joins IBC in 1962.
And his account gives us this great perspective of the new guard.
He talks about the fan factor, which I love. It shows that even though the industry execs hated Meek, the young engineers, they idolized him.
Florence admits he would make up excuses just to get into the cutting room when Meek was there.
Yeah, he'd pretend he had some technical query for the cutting engineer, but really he just wanted to watch Meek work, to listen to the new production.
They wanted to see the magic happen.
I wanted the recipe. They wanted to know how he got that density of sound.
But Florence's oral history, it shifts pretty quickly from that technical admiration to the atmosphere of the building itself.
IBC wasn't just a neutral space. Florence describes this pervasive, very strange feeling that just permeated the place.
And it's interesting, he says it happened even in the mundane spaces, like the little outbuilding where they'd go for coffee. It wasn't just in the dark corners.
True. But the core of the studio legend, what he calls the Joe Meek incident, is tied directly to the building's infrastructure.
The architecture is crucial here.
It is. The studio layout required this very specific closing protocol. If you were the last engineer working late, which they often were, you couldn't just lock the front door and go.
What did you have to do?
You had to secure the first floor studio, go down to the ground floor, and then you had to descend this flight of old stone stairs into the basement.
And the basement wasn't just for storage. It housed the maintenance department, the echo chambers.
And most importantly, the main power breakers.
Oh.
Exactly. You had to physically go down into the dark to kill the mains for the entire building.
And those stone stairs, that's significant acoustically.
Very. Stone is reflective. It's acoustically bright. It amplifies high-frequency transients. If you hear a sound on stone stairs, it's distinct. It's sharp.
So the story that was passed down to Florence involves Meek doing this exact ritual. It's 1962. He's finished a late session. He's all alone.
He heads down those stone stairs to cut the power.
Okay.
He gets near the bottom, and he hears movement. Now, Meek is a logical guy, if eccentric. He knows the front door isn't locked yet, so his first thought is an intruder, or maybe a musician came back for some gear.
So he calls out, "Who's there?"
He does. And the response he gets is audio, but it's not verbal.
Footsteps.
He hears footsteps. But they aren't shuffling or hesitant. They are purposeful steps coming down the stone stairs from behind him.
And this is where the acoustics matter. He's at the bottom. The sound is coming from the top, descending towards him.
And he turns around to face whatever it is, and there is absolutely no one there.
But the sound doesn't stop.
No. The footsteps continue to descend. They reach his level, and then they physically walk past him.
That spatial anomaly is what makes this so chilling. It's not a random creak in the distance.
Not at all. It's a localized sound source moving through three-dimensional space, displacing air, but with no physical form attached.
Meek's reaction was
primal. He didn't try to debug it. He didn't check the reverb chambers. He sprinted back up the stairs, ran into the building, and left the doors unlocked. He just abandoned the facility.
Which, for a control freak like Joe Meek, that is significant. He surrendered the security of his sanctuary because the environment itself became hostile.
And the source says the staff at IBC, they treated this story as studio lore.
Right. The kind of thing you tell the new guy to spook him during a night shift. Don't go in the basement. That's where Meek saw the ghost.
It had this mythical quality to it.
Until 1963.
Right. This is when the narrative shifts from folklore to first-hand data. And it involves one of the most mechanically complex instruments ever built.
The Mellotron.
The Mellotron. And the technical context here is so important. In '63, the owners of IBC became the distributors for it. And for anyone who thinks of sampling as, a digital process and a drag and drop a WAV file, the Mellotron is a mechanical nightmare.
It's basically a keyboard where every key triggers its own little tape deck.
That's a perfect description. It's a whole rack of magnetic tapes. You press a key, a pinch roller engages, pulls the tape across a playback head.
When you let go,
a spring snaps the tape back to the start. It's a beast. But to make it work, you need content. You need all those recordings of violins, flutes, brass sections.
And somebody has to record all of that and then edit it.
Yes. And Florence describes this as an absolute grind. They had to record every single chromatic note of every single instrument. Then they had to physically cut the tape to the exact length the machine needed, which was about 8 seconds of audio.
So you've got Florence and another engineer pulling an all-nighter. They're sleep-deprived. They're doing this repetitive, monotonous labor. They're basically in an editing trance.
And they're working in the number 2 control room, which is on the 3rd floor. So again, the architecture is key.
Okay.
This room had an old door that opened onto a defunct wooden staircase.
So this wasn't the stone staircase from the basement. This was like a blocked-off service route.
Correct. It was effectively a dead space, just a void behind a door. They're splicing tape in the early hours of the morning, and they hear it.
Footsteps.
Footsteps, but different from what Meek heard.
How so?
The acoustic profile matched the surface. Florence describes them explicitly as wooden footsteps, that hollow, resonant thud of a boot on timber.
And they're coming from the other side of that locked door, from the defunct staircase.
Ascending, coming up. The rationalization phase kicks in right away. They look at each other. Florence asks, "We're all locked up, aren't we?"
And they confirm, yeah, the building is secured, but the data, the sound, it contradicts the logic.
And the footsteps are getting louder. They're coming up the stairs, closer and closer to that control room door.
You can just imagine them staring at the door handle, waiting for it to turn.
Florence says the sensation was physical. He says it made the hairs on the back of your head just go up. The steps walk right up to the landing directly outside their door. And then they just stop.
Nothing, just presence.
Silence. He said they opened the door eventually, and of course the staircase was empty. Dust and shadows. But for Florence, this was the moment. This was the corroboration. He says specifically, Joe Meek's story had a lot of truth in it.
The skepticism just evaporated because the phenomenon was consistent.
Yes. It wasn't visual, it was purely auditory. A playback anomaly in the building itself.
I want to circle back to this idea of deep listening that's required for this job. These are audio engineers.
A critical point.
Their entire livelihood depends on distinguishing between a fundamental frequency and a harmonic, or hearing the difference between plate reverb and spring reverb.
Their brains are literally wired to analyze sound. They're not people who are prone to imagining things. If they hear a footstep, they're subconsciously analyzing the decay time, the frequency response of the material, wood versus stone, the proximity effect.
So when Alan Florence says he heard wooden footsteps, that's not some vague impression. That's a technical assessment.
Precisely. And that, to me, makes the whole account so much more disturbing. If a casual observer hears a noise in an old building, you can write it off. Settling pipes, wind, whatever.
Sure.
But when a mastering engineer tells you, I heard boots on a wooden staircase ascending at a steady cadence, you have to treat that as reliable data.
It makes you wonder about the relationship between the high-intensity creative work happening there and the environment itself. I mean, you mentioned Meek was pushing equipment to its breaking point.
Overdriving tubes, saturating tape.
Is it possible that the sheer electromagnetic energy of a studio like that acts as some kind of beacon?
Well, there's a theory. And look, we're definitely drifting to speculation here.
Of course.
But there's a theory that recording studios are essentially batteries. You have massive amounts of electrical current running through the mains. You have huge magnetic fields from the tape machines and the monitors. And then you have the raw emotional intensity of the performance.
That red light fever.
Exactly. The adrenaline of getting the take, the frustration of the mix. IBC saw incredible amounts of that creative energy. So if emotions or events can leave an imprint on a location, what some call a residual haunting, a recording studio seems like the perfect medium for it.
Because it's a place literally designed to capture and store energy.
And Meek was a conductor for that energy. It's tragic when you think about it. In his personal life, he was famously obsessed with seances, with the occult.
Right.
But in the studio, he was just trying to do a job. And the studio itself seemed to push back.
It adds this whole other layer of darkness to the Meek sound. You know, when we listen to those records now, the heavy compression, the distortion, that claustrophobic atmosphere, we usually just chalk it up to his artistic vision.
But knowing this context, the context of IBC, you have to wonder how much of that anxiety was environmental. He was trying to create a totally controlled sonic world because the physical world around him felt uncontrollable.
And in the end, the paranormal one, or whatever it was, it just breached his defenses.
I think that image of him fleeing up the stairs is the perfect symbol for it. It's the moment the sonic alchemist realized he was completely outmatched.
It really changes how you interpret the history of that era. We focus so much on the gear lists. What microphone did they use? What was the console?
Yeah.
But we rarely ask about the room tone. And in the case of IBC, the room tone apparently included phantom footsteps.
It's a good reminder that the vibe of the studio isn't just about the lighting or the rugs on the floor. It's about the history that's soaked into the walls.
So as we wrap up this analysis, I think there's a thought to leave you with about the very nature of recording. We build these spaces to be time capsules, right? We spin reels of magnetic tape to catch a voice before it just fades into the air. We are constantly trying to arrest the passage of time.
We're trying to make the ephemeral permanent.
Exactly. So if we build machines and dedicate entire rooms to preserving the past, maybe we shouldn't be so surprised when the past decides to stick around.
Or to walk up the stairs and see what you're working on.
So if you're ever in a quiet room and you hear a floorboard creak, just tell yourself it's the building settling. Don't analyze the frequency or response.
Good advice. Keep the headphones on.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you on the next one.